Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of In the Booth. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit closer to my heart. Not necessarily to any car we have in stock or inventory right now, but just kind of going down memory lane on a promise I kind of made to myself when I was younger and just starting my life in automotive, and not from a career standpoint, but more so from a personal standpoint. When I really look back to when cars really started to grab me, like a tangible idea, like I was gonna buy a car, I was gonna own a car, I was gonna get into this whole thing, was basically the mid-90s for me. My brother had just ventured in and bought a beautiful E30 325 IS. And I was like in love with that car, but I knew I couldn't reach that high, unfortunately, at that time in my life. So, Volkswagen was really the next best thing. And as you're kind of getting into that headspace, you kind of got to make a decision as a young guy. Are you going to go American? Are you going to go Japanese? Or are you going to go German? For me, I was really enthralled with the whole front-wheel drive sport compact movement, and I was really impressed by seeing all these Hondas down in the US starting to running the quarter mile, and they were starting to like pull like very decent times, starting to get into the 11s at that point, I think, in terms of quarter mile time. I was super impressed by that. I was super impressed by the technology, and more importantly, I think I was really seduced by the level of engineering that each one of these guys or girls needed to do back then on their own to get their car faster, to perform better, and to be more reliable. There was no JEGS catalog to flip through and buy this set of heads and these headers and this rear end for my Fox body Mustang, So going into that world, the Honda world was kind of, really enticing me. But I gotta say, this is actually before EG Civic. I actually forget which model it would be, but they didn't really entice me the way, a Volkswagen Rabbit, Mark I Rabbit Golf would, or even more importantly, a Mk2 GTI. I always thought it was the most beautiful thing I had seen. I love this boxy look. It kind of reminded me of an E30 325 IS or a 325 of any range. And I just really loved the whole boxy look, the fatness of it, and of course the tuning potential. So today we're here to talk about my personal car. This is my 1991 16-valve GTI. Finished in classic Tornado Red. This is a 91 model year Mk2 GTI 16-valve. And what really appealed to me about this car from the get-go was how much of the aftermarket was kind of used to make the car and put it on the showroom floor. Obviously, when the Mark II was introduced, it was 1983. The Rabbit was just finishing its tenure as the original sport compact car. And obviously we're looking to redesign the car and modernize it for the 80s, as that design actually dates back to the 70s. And through basically not much change really. The platforms of the cars are dramatically different, whereas the Rabbit was a full frame car. So basically when the engine was dropped into it, it was connected to the frame rails, and that was connected right to the car, versus kind of what we have here today, which is a subframe vehicle in the front. Obviously added a lot more modernization to the way the car drove and stuff. It was originally introduced with its small little 4-cylinder engines, producing somewhere around 100 horsepower or 80 to 100 horsepower in that area there. And as the car grew, in 1985, the GTI was introduced. And at that time, it would have come with a 1.8 liter, 8-valve inline 4-cylinder engine, made it to a 5-speed gearbox. Most common color was a red as well. And the 8-valve, it was okay. It had the smaller bumpers on it and the 3/4 glass windows. But it was kind of the beginning of this whole thing that was going on. But of course, I was a little bit younger at that time, and as the car progressed, in the 90s came, to me, the best generation of the GTI was finally introduced. Of course, in '87, the 16 valve was first introduced with its 1.8 liter, 123 horsepower inline four. Actually a pretty quick car. Some could argue a little bit faster than the 2 liter. But then of course in 1990, the 2 liter would be introduced. And when the 2 liter was introduced, it came with a whole lot of other stuff. What was that stuff? Well, it's basically all seen right here on this car. So from factory, the car would come with the Recaro seats. Branded in Recaro, a beautiful gray finish seat with a beautiful red pinstriping on the dash all the way around, and a couple insignias in there to mark that it is a 16 valve. Because you remember, when it's 16 valves, it's actually 16 valves of fury that happens under the hood of this car. Okay. From there, you know, they look to BBS for rolling stock, and these are the RM 15-inch 2-piece wheel. So beautiful in the car, fits so nicely. It's actually so period correct, and what a great, great little addition. And I love the fact that they're not branded Volkswagen in the center. I love the fact that they say BBS, and that's from the factory on the showroom floor. From there, the car got its big bumper configuration. The big bumper configuration is basically what we see here, with the bumper starting up here at the top of this, at the top of the bumper line where the fender ends, and carries all the way to the bottom, actually ending all the way down here, versus basically the original bumper, which would have ended here, and under here we would have just saw plain bodywork. And then of course, the huge flares that would go over top of the wheel wells, carry along in this black skirting all the way down, and of course happen again over the rear wheels. Such a full, low, just a beautiful, beautiful little boxy design. You know, after buying my first one, which was actually a 1991, same year as this, it was the that Montana green color. It was an 8 valve though. So obviously, you know, I always dreamed of having the higher performance 16 valve, but just so expensive at the time. It was so out of reach. And actually, they were becoming harder and harder to find. You know, one thing that happened is when the VR6 Corrado was introduced in the mid 90s, or sorry, in the early 90s, the VR6 Corrado and the 16 valve GTI, or basically the Mark II in general, shared a lot of similarity in the way they were manufactured. Both are actually Mark II based cars. So what was happening is a lot of guys were getting these VR6s, you know, crashed or otherwise, and taking the motors and the suspension and everything out of them and installing them into these guys. So this car grew from a 16 valve GTI up into a 12 valve V6 basically. And that was happening everywhere. And of course I couldn't help it either. I was seeing how fast that combination was working. It was really a good rival for a lot of the Honda powered guys who were running GSR motors in their Civics, and we needed to react. And unfortunately, the platform for the 16 valve and the 8 valve just really couldn't breathe. It couldn't generate the jam like those Honda powered 4-cylinders. So displacement is the only thing we could rely on. So VR6s were transplanted into these cars. I probably couldn't even tell you how much. I built 6 myself, and every one of them was, you know, different and unique in their own way, but my God, did it ever work really fast. A stock motor VR6 in one of these would catapult you from running probably a high 15, low 16 in a quarter mile in this configuration to a mid to low 14 with the VR6. And that's before you did any work to the motor or added a power adder or anything like that. Great combination. But of course, as time goes on, you know, you start to think back about what the car used to be. And as I said earlier, I always imagined I would never leave this game. If I, you know, got into a position where I can afford something more, I can maybe, you know, afford a Porsche one day or have something like that. I always said I would stay true to what I loved as a teenager, as a young adult, screwing around with all these cars. And I said I would always have a Mark II GTI. So my quest to find one started about, I would say 3 years ago. Sorry, this is my usual walk around the car, but you're having a hard time seeing me because this thing is so high. Everything I'm usually doing is like this much lower. But anyway, I started looking around for a car, and you know, there was really just nothing to be had that was as original as what we see here. You know, finding one that doesn't have a VR6 or a 1.8T or any kind of different engine in it was virtually impossible. Hard to find one that still, you know, retained its factory interior. It's hard to find one that hasn't been modified beyond the point where you can't really return it. This particular 16 valve GTI hails from Vancouver. Kind of gone through a semi-restoration. Still a few more things that I'm working on it right now just to get a little bit more legit original in terms of just like the shift knob and the handbrake, which is different, and a couple other small bits. But overall, just a great platform for me to work with. When I found it, it had already been fully resprayed and it was a full seal off. You know, everything was taken off and the car was blasted at that point. Still got to touch up the rear hatch, which is slightly off in color. From there, basically, the guy redid all the black plastic on the car. He did a really good job of that. Of course, I'm in the quest to find 16 valve flares, particularly our left front, as this one's a little bit marred just over here. But man, as we know, almost impossible to find. So if you're watching this video and you have one, I'm ready to pay. From there, the interior was stripped out and they had a very nice cleanup. A new carpet was laid down, a new roof liner was installed, and the seats reinstalled along with the door cards. Very clean work, and the car works exceptional. The 2-liter 16 valve also benefited from the whole process and had it fully rebuilt about 3 years ago. Actually runs very strong, way quicker than I remembered it to be. I'd probably say the only thing I can't stand about it is that when I'm on the highway at 130 kilometers an hour, this thing is buzzing at 4,000 RPM and you just feel like a connecting rod's gonna hit you in the head. So I really do wish I had a bit of a taller 5th gear, which I remember was a pretty big mod on these transmissions back in the day. But more importantly than anything else, it's another one of those cars that just kind of makes everybody feel so good. You know, everybody I've taken out in the car laughs at it, loves it, hates it, but always kind of like feel a little special. You know, you drive it around downtown Toronto and the thumbs up is everywhere. Everybody's just absolutely loving it. And the condition is so pristine that, like, you know, I mess with the idea of modifying it or doing kind of what I used to do to all the cars that I had built before, but I can't bring myself to do anything to it. Aside from just a little lowering spring it has in it, and I do have an exhaust system I purchased just because this old system is just looking a little ratty. It's almost embarrassing. I'm not even gonna show it to you guys in this video because it's super lame. But aside from that, I can't bring myself to do anything to it. You know, again, throughout all the cars that we do here at Pfaff Reserve, there's one thing we'll probably never forget. You know, specialty is not defined by price. You know, throughout our entire collections over the years, we've never really veered off of what we thought was special. And it doesn't matter if the car is a $25,000 car, it doesn't matter if the car is a $2.5 million car. You know, special is special. And at our age and most of the clients that we deal with, they really relate to cars like this because it's what they had when they were younger. It's what they wanted when they were younger. I couldn't even tell you how many big clients we've met over the years that were introduced to us through products like this. It's happened many times. And something we'll never forget and something we'll continue to do. But, you know, it was really exciting for me. You know, this show has been fun to do and always wanted to really talk about the 16 valve GTI and the praise and how special it was. Because it really was absolutely the car to have. You know, I joke around with everybody at the store, it's probably the most irreplaceable car we have at the store right now. And we got some heavy artillery there right now. You know, it's just hilarious to go through that. But, you know, I'm pretty happy with myself that I went out, looked, found it, and I'm really happy to own this specific one. She'll stay with me, and you know, and I'll enjoy it as much as I can. And of course, if you guys ever want to have a look at it, hop by the store. It's there almost all the time. And if you want to just have a look at it and have a seat in it, I'd be so happy to show somebody the car. It's so much fun. So yeah, thanks so much, guys, and I really appreciate you guys tuning in for another short episode of In the Booth. I'm glad you guys are listening to me talk about my youth and talk about this silly little car. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you here guys for the next one. Thanks.